This morning, we're spotlighting the mysterious death of Ellen Greenberg. On Monday, the city of Philadelphia settled 2 lawsuits with her parents following a 14-year fight for justice. The 27-year-old teacher was found dead by her fiance. She had more than 20 stab wounds on her body. She was found in her Philadelphia apartment. This is in the year 2011. The case was initially ruled a homicide until it was changed just a few months later and ruled a suicide. But now, wait, not so fast. More than a decade later, we've got a jaw-dropping admission by the medical examiner that the manner of death in the case of Ellen Greenberg should be amended to other than suicide. Her parents have long maintained that the ME was wrong, and they spoke to PennLive.com.
They said something about suicide, which I never considered for 1 second. Never, ever, ever would she do that.
It's like somebody punches you hard in the stomach and again, and the air goes out of your lungs and you can't breathe.
Oh, these poor parents. Now the city of Philadelphia has agreed to reopen the evidence with the current medical examiner. So let's talk more about this case. If you haven't heard about it, you need to hear about it. I want to bring in someone who's been following this case for a long, long time before it started grabbing national headlines just the last couple days. Retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindeffer. Jen, good morning to you. So would you walk us through the story, please? It's my understanding Ellen Greenberg was engaged and that it was her fiance who finds her and tells 911 that she stabbed herself.
Yes, it's a very interesting story, to say the least. Essentially, Ellen was found by her fiance. Her fiance had said he went to go work out, and when he returned, the door was locked. He says he forced the door open, but the evidence does not support that claim. He said he went in there and he called 911, claiming he couldn't really determine what had happened. I think he even mentioned that she might have slipped. They asked him to give CPR, and he said, well, I can't give CPR because there's a knife protruding from her chest. So the 911 call is one of the most absolutely unimaginable call that you'll ever hear that does not make sense with the crime scene.
No, it sure doesn't. It sure doesn't, Jen. And we've been talking about the case this morning. In Florida, we're watching Colin Griffith's case where he's saying that his mom fell on the knife and that it pierced through her neck. In this case, it's my understanding that fiance, Mr. Sam Goldberg, said the same thing to 911, that Ellen fell on the knife. And we know that she had 20 stab wounds and also bruises on her body that had been somewhat healed over too. Your thoughts on that, please, Jen?
Right, so to give some specifics, there were 20 stab wounds, approximately 10 in the back, including a gaping wound in her head. Now, these wounds were actually, according to the private investigator and another ME, were caused by 2 separate knives, Julie. So the thought that somebody would be in the throes of committing suicide and change knives out does not make a lot of sense. In addition, she was found actually stood up, sort of leaning up against a counter space, and it was obvious from the signs in her apartment that she was actually moved post-mortem, and there was a post-mortem wound that then other wounds in her chest area were made afterwards. So the whole case never really comported with any sort of suicide.
You're so right, Jen. This case stinks to high heaven. And I want to read a direct quote from the ME who is now changing his opinion, Dr. Marlon Osborne. Let's take a look at what he said. He said, since issuing the amended death certificate, I have become aware of additional information. He goes on to say, I am now aware that information exists which draws into question, for example, whether Ellen's fiance was witnessed entering the apartment before placing the 911 call on January 26th, 2011. Okay, well, that's one fact, but what about what you just mentioned, Jen? What about what you just mentioned, the stab wounds to the back and someone is going to rule this suicide? I think this is stunning to me. Look at this. Here's the timeline here. How initially decided to be a homicide, then changed to suicide, then now, okay, the suicide determination's been removed. I'm just not sure how in the world an ME arrives at that second conclusion reached in April of 2011. Jen, does the family say what they think might have occurred here, or why this could have possibly been changed?
Yes, Julie, a couple more details also. Initially on that 911 call, he doesn't necessarily say she fell on a knife. He just says she fell. In other words, he makes no inference as to how she actually died. Recall in this case, the whole crime scene was completely scrubbed the day after. Law enforcement gave permission for a professional cleaning crew to go in. And the uncle of the fiance, who is a judge, he came in and took all of the devices, unfortunately. So unfortunately, so much evidence is now contaminated, but they truly believe that somebody entered and killed Ellen. And that is how she died. Nothing to do with any sort of suicide. There's really no evidence of any suicide.
Jen, thank you for that. And it seems that the family has just not been heard for all these years. And they've been pleading and begging. And now finally their cries are being heard. Yesterday was a pivotal day, wasn't it, Jen, when they went to court? Apparently they've got a couple civil lawsuits going, and now it seems that people are starting to pay attention, aren't they?
Well, yes, honestly, when I got involved in this case and they first contacted me and sent me what they had, all the evidence they had, just looking at the autopsy and the photos and all the other evidence in terms of the door lock and the crime scene, it was unbelievable that this determination was made, and it was switched to a homicide or to a suicide based on the fact they said that she was by herself. Typically, a ME will look at all the surrounding factors, but just to take that one factor and change it made no sense. As far as the parents, when I first spoke to them years ago, they were broken. And now to see them break down in tears of joy that finally they're being understood and finally the truth is coming out.
Yes, it sure is. Jen, I'm curious if you see perhaps signs of domestic violence here. I asked that question because, as you know, there were bruises found on her body that were in various stages of healing, according to the pathology experts. And I'm just so curious if it seems to you that she might have been suffering, perhaps, in a relationship setting.
Yeah, absolutely. So according to the parents, from what they could see externally, everything was okay, right? And this often happens in domestic violence. You really don't know what's going on. It wasn't until post-mortem they discovered all these bruises, and the parents, I can tell you, are convinced that she was suffering from domestic violence.
Yes, I'm seeing here an outside pathologist who looked at the case said that various bruises on her body were consistent with a repeated beating. So now I'm wondering, Jen, do you think that somebody, a person or persons, is going to be charged here?
I think this one's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult because, as I mentioned, they came in and completely wiped that crime scene with a professional crime scene cleaning crew, like a hazmat cleaning crew. So I think it makes it difficult. But there are initial photos that were taken that I think could be very helpful. And I think re-interviewing everybody, it's certainly a possibility.
Yes, well, your advocacy and your insight has been just tremendous on this one. Thank you so much for sharing this story with us.